Good evening. Joanne here again on my weekly Monday lives. And as mentioned in my last video, over the next couple of weeks, several weeks actually, I'll be focused on going over investing in TFSA for Canadians, and specifically looking at investing in our TFSAs with the Dividend Snowball um, strategy. So, when you're thinking about what you can expect for this series, I have it in my show notes, but we're going to talk about the TFSA and why I personally have fallen in love with my TFSA and pros and cons for different types of people. We're going to talk about why I chose to focus on dividend stocks as my main investment vehicle for this strategy that I'm going to be working through over the next several weeks. We're going to look at how do we implement a process and strategies to supersize our returns. We're going to compare the different platforms that you can use to have your investments, purchasing them and monitoring their performance. I'm going to share with you some of the recommended reading and material or even YouTube channels that I prefer and would recommend that you take a look at. We're going to look at how to choose dividend stocks and looking at diversification. What level of diversification is optimal for for maximizing your returns? So those are just a few topics that we're going to cover. And of course, when I shared about this topic last week, I had already shared in general um, when I was talking about real estate and stock investing, two really key books that I personally love and recommend that you read. If you haven't seen that video, I encourage you to take a look. I'll put a link to it in the show notes below. So, TFSAs. Personally, for me, I think it's really important to understand the vehicle, and it's still relatively new, TFSAs versus RRSPs. And so, personally, I like the TFSA because it is certain that when I remove my money, I will not pay taxes. If you've watched a lot of videos comparing TFSAs versus RRSPs, the key underlying assumption is that the tax rate that you'll pay when you remove or withdraw your money later is going to be lower than the tax rate that you paid when you contributed to the plan, be it an RRSP or tax-free savings account, for the RRSP to be a benefit to to the individual. If your tax rate is going to be the same on entry versus exit, then all things being equal, be it an RRSP or a tax-free savings account, is the same outcome for you. And I'll link a calculator that I like that's quite simple that you can see that in numbers wise. However, I think it's really clear to call out that that assumption may not be valid. There's the assumption, for example, that when you retire, you'll be pulling out less income because you'll have less expenses. From the time you are here now, depending on your career progression, that might not be the case. You may have built up considerable assets and therefore your income level has actually grown over the years. Or vice versa, your income level right now is really low. Maybe you're just out of university and the income that you're earning is below the taxable level. And so you're basically not paying any taxes. Then, for me personally, in that situation, there could be a benefit for you to contribute to the tax free savings account versus an RRSP because you're not paying any taxes, while the potential for you to be paying taxes later is there as your employment or other income increases. Personally, when I think about TFSA versus an RRSP, as I've said, I like certainty. And so I prefer the tax free savings account because the future is uncertain. But with a tax free savings account versus an RRSP, I know for certain that I won't be paying any taxes upon the um, upon the taking out of the funds, regardless of the time frame, right? So I could take out the funds tomorrow if I have a really big return and I need that cash out to cover an expense. I can take out those funds tomorrow and not pay taxes. And I don't have these underlying assumptions that when I do want to take it out, let's say during retirement, which is again an underlying assumption that that's the only time you want to take out cash, is that I'm going to be in a lower income tax bracket. Who knows? Government may increase the taxes over the span of several years here. We don't know what's going to happen. There's uncertainty and assumptions with that scenario. While with for me personally, if there's a certainty that with the tax-free savings account, whenever I take it out, be it tomorrow or next week or next year or in retirement, I'm not paying taxes. And I like dealing with certainty. So that's why personally I prefer the tax-free savings account. The other key reason why I like the tax-free savings account is when I take out money from the tax-free savings account, my contribution room is reinstated the next year. When you take out money from your RRSP, you lose that contribution room, assuming you haven't taken it out under those qualifying programs like the home buyer plan or the long term education plan. So, those are the two things that my personal decision, which may differ from yours, is I like the certainty that no matter when I take it out, I won't be paying taxes. And two, when I do take it out, I'm not losing that room. Once the year ends, the next year that room gets reinstated, and therefore allows me to continue investing consistent sums of money depending on how much I've taken out into my tax-free savings account. All right. I want to keep this video short and just kind of give a quick preview and touch a little bit about why I personally have chosen to focus on building my investment portfolio in a tax-free savings account. I welcome your comments. When you have been building your investment portfolio, what's your preference? Is it an RRSP or a tax-free savings account, and why? And again, I'll put in my show notes a link to the calculator that makes it really quick and easy for you to see that. I'll link two, one that's really simple and one that's more detailed, because again, there's a lot of assumptions that we're putting in into the case of comparing an RRSP to a tax-free savings account. And then I'll also put a link to my video that I did last week where I shared that I was going on this and a few recommendations in terms of reading. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week.